Hello and welcome to the Anglian Flaneurs. Today we're back at an old haunt of mine. We're at Finsbury Square, close to City Road, and we're going to be revisiting where we were last Thursday when we tried to get into Bunhill Fields Burial Ground, and rather stupid of me because it was closed and we're going back in the night, so hopefully we'll be able to give you some good footage of what is one of the special places in London. Before we get over to the burial grounds, I'm just going to reminisce about old times. Now, I used to work in a building here, as I think I mentioned last week, and this bowling green at Finsbury Square is where I used to bowl 2 or 3 times a week from about May every year through to about the end of September, so it's got happy memories for me. It's been over 25 years since I would have bowled here, but it's good to be back. And this is my old place of work. It's now called Alpha Beta House, which has got a nice financial sound to it. I used to know it as Triton Court. I'll have one more look at Finsbury Square and reminisce. Now, the one thing I noticed from 25-30 years ago from when I used to work here is how the area is now surrounded by high-rise buildings. Those city skyscrapers are reaching ever further out to the city edges. Technically speaking, we're just outside the City of London boundaries. This is one of my special places of London. It's got a magic at any time of the year. You visit it any time over the 4 seasons, it just feels different, but it's always a special place to come to. The name Bunhill derives from Bunhill, which is linked to burials from at least Saxon times, but this area is more known for the deposit of human bones amounting to something like over 1,000 cartloads brought from St Paul's charnel house in 1549 when the building was demolished. The dry bones were deposited on the moor and capped with a thin layer of soil. Just over 100 years later, in 1665, the City of London Corporation decided to use some of this land as a common burial ground for the interment of bodies of inhabitants who had died of the plague and could not be accommodated in the many churchyards around the City of London. Church of England officials never consecrated the ground nor used it for burials. And Mr. Tyndall took over ownership of this area, and he allowed extramural graveyard burials in what was unconsecrated soil, and therefore it became popular with non-conformists, those Protestant Christians who practiced their faith outside the Church of England. An order for the closure of Bunhill Fields here was made in December 1853. A year earlier, the Burial Act had been passed, which enabled grounds to be closed once they became full. The final burial took place on the 5th of January 1854 of Elizabeth Howell Oliver. Over its history, some 123,000 interments had taken place at this burial ground. So after burials ceased to take place, the area known as Bunhill Fields became under a lot of pressure for redevelopment. Let's face it, it was in a prime location in the City of London, and in order to prevent the land from being redeveloped, the Bunhill Fields Preservation Committee was formed. In 1867, the City of London Corporation, with the help of the committee, obtained an Act of Parliament called the Bunhill Fields Burial Ground Act of 1867, which was, in the words of the Act, for the preservation of Bunhill Fields Burial Ground as an open space. Here we can see the burial site of the famous John Bunyan. He was born in 1628, died in 1688, and was an English writer and Puritan preacher, best remembered as the author of the Christian allegory, The Pilgrim's Progress. When 16, John Bunyan became a member of the Parliamentary Army during the first stages of the English Civil War. After 3 years in the army, he returned back to his home in Bedfordshire and learnt the trade of tinker. After marriage, he joined a non-conformist group in Bedford and became a preacher. With the restoration of the monarchy in 1660 through Charles II, non-conformism was curtailed and John Bunyan was arrested and spent the next 12 years in prison as he refused to give up his preaching. As I mentioned a few moments ago, we're just outside the boundaries of the City of London. We're in the London Borough of Finsbury, the boundary being roughly round about where Finsbury Square and Chiswell Street are. As we said earlier, with ever more high-rise buildings being built around the area, these burial grounds and cemeteries really are a haven for wildlife and for peaceful retreat and contemplation. Burial grounds here have been under constant threat of redevelopment. The last time I read about it in the Evening Standard was when Boris Johnson was Mayor of London. I believe he wanted to put high-rise office buildings on this site. And we all know how Boris Johnson really cares about London, so there we are. And from nearly ruining Bunhill Fields, Boris Johnson went on to ruin the country. Crikey, I'm just depressed mentioning that name. Well, let's change the mood and come on to someone much more enlightened, the great William Blake. William Blake was born on the 28th of November 1757 at 28 Broad Street in Soho, London. He was the third of 7 children. Blake's family were English dissenters, though he was baptised at St James's Church in Piccadilly. After leaving school at 10 and with the help of his father, Blake became an engravist. And in his spare time he studied the Bible and the great poets. Blake became interested in sketching and would often journey over to Westminster Abbey to pursue this love. And it was here that he experienced one of his first visions, where he saw Christ with his apostles and a great procession of monks and priests. In 1779, Blake became a student at the Academy, the Royal Academy in Old Somerset House. There's so much to the William Blake story that we cannot even pretend to cover even a fraction of it here, so I'll come back with a later vlog to explore William Blake in much more detail. William Blake for many is best known for penning the anthem Jerusalem and for seeing his visions on Hampstead Heath. And here we see the burial site of Joseph Swain, a well-known preacher and poet. And here we can see the 1870 obelisk to the famous author Daniel Defoe, author of Robinson Crusoe. Due to algae and the passage of time, it's difficult to make out the inscription on the obelisk. Daniel Defoe died in poverty and his grave was marked with a simple headstone. In the winter of 1857-58, at a time when the burial ground was closed and neglected, the grave was struck by lightning and the headstone broken. Some 11 or 12 years later, a campaign was started by James Clark, editor of the Christian World, to place a more substantial memorial, shall we say, on his grave. And this is today why we see this wonderful obelisk in front of us. Let's have a few minutes of peace and quiet and reflection, just with background music, just to look over this wonderful burial ground. In my mind, truly one of the great sights of London. Just look at these magnificent paving slabs. I wonder how many people over the years have walked over them. They're so smooth. And I rather like them. It's almost like walking over glass. I hope you, the viewer, can really appreciate the wonderment and how special this place is. It may not be one of the Magnificent Seven, but it's still a very, very special place. I must be in an abstract frame of mind, because just look at the tree here, just look at this London plane, look at the trunk of the tree up into the canopy. Wow, what a marvellous sight. We've captured that fantastic part of the year where the trees are losing their leaves, but there's still some few leaves left. That just gives you a wonderful vista. Now we come to one of the strangest tombstones in London, according to that wonderful publication, The Londonist. It's the tombstone of Mary Page. Now, she was a lady who suffered from a form of dropsy that caused excess fluid to build in the space around the lungs. Now we'll have to go to the other side of this tombstone to really see the strangeness of it all. We'll just look at a few other gravestones first, and then we'll come back to it in a few moments. Now we're back at the other side of Mary Page's tombstone, and this is the real weirdness of it all. It says in 67 months she was tapped 66 times, had taken away 240 gallons of water, without ever repining as her case or ever fearing the operation. The statistics of all this seem slightly exaggerated. By all accounts, Mary Page was a well-liked philanthropist and churchgoer who gave copiously to charity. And she was the wife of Sir Gregory Page MP, a wealthy merchant and politician. This inscription on her tombstone was requested by Mary Page herself. I'm doing my little bit again to publicise the artillery arms. It's a little different from the view that we got last Thursday when the place was rammed and people were drinking out onto the pavements and even the road. Honestly, I don't know the landlord there. I haven't been in there for years. I'd like to go in there now, but I've got to get back to work. While circulating but not going into the artillery arms, I've come across Whitecross Street. Now, I've been down here several times before. It's a very storied and historic street and well worth a mention. There was a prison built here in the early 19th century to ease overcrowding at Newgate Prison, with a capacity for 400 prisoners. It closed in 1870 when all the prisoners were transferred to the newly built Holloway Prison. And also it's home to the famous Whitecross Street Market. Many of the buildings that we see here are owned and run by the Peabody Trust. Now, the trust itself was founded in 1862 as the Peabody Donation Fund. It is a fine institution and it's London's oldest and largest housing association with around 55,000 properties across London and the South East. I've dropped in a map of Finsbury from 1561. Now the reason for doing this is I've always heard many authors talk about the great fields of Islington north of the city before industrialisation and the population of London increasing rapidly during the 19th century. And it was here, especially during Tudor times, on a Sunday afternoon that the great skill and great sport of archery would take place, at a time when any male of a certain age was expected to practice on the butts should he be called into service for war. Let's get back into our time machine and just think what the fields of Finsbury would have looked like, say, in 1570 during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, with men on a Sunday afternoon practising their skill here. The area known as Bunhill Fields in the bottom right hand corner is today's Finsbury Circus. We'll have a quick look through the gates of the Honourable Artillery Company against the backdrop of the city skyscrapers, and then we'll have once again a look at these magnificent terraced houses on Bunhill Row. There's lots of places of learning here. We have the Bayes Business School, and we also will see the plaque for the University of Law. That's it from the Anglian Flaneurs and from Bunhill Row. I hope you've enjoyed our trip to Bunhill Row today. We revisited practically where we were last Thursday, but this time in the light, or whatever light you get at 3 o'clock on a cold and wet November afternoon. You could say that you've seen the light and shade of Bunhill Row and the Bunhill Fields Burial Ground. And on that pathetic corny note, it's goodbye from the Anglian Flaneurs. Hope to see you again soon.